This is Ernesto Juan from Sudan Productions, and today we are going to continue talking about traveling to Cuba from the United States. First chapter of my vlog, How to Travel to Cuba from the US, I said that I have been surprised in my first trip to Cuba how many Americans were flying on my plane to Cuba, and both from Havana to Miami. Then I said that in my first from Miami to Havana there were 5 Cubans out of probably about 200 US passengers. And then on my way back from Havana, there were only 3 Cubans on that flight. Anyways, we are going to drive to Orlando's office right now, and we are going to talk about these 12 categories under which any American citizen can travel to Cuba. We are going to analyze one by one these 12 categories. Many American people are unaware that they can travel to Cuba. Many Americans don't know how easy it is to travel to Cuba. Now you don't need to prove, you don't need to ask for permission. You can only contact a travel agency in the United States and tell them that you want to travel to Cuba. They will give you a visa, you sign the visa, and then you have to mark under which category you are traveling to Cuba. It's easier than many people believe. Anyway, let's not waste any more time. Let's drive to Orlando's office and let's talk about these 12 categories of how Americans can travel legally to Cuba. See you in a bit.
First of all, let me make it very clear that as from December 17, 2014, the government of the United States decided to expand or authorize 5 other reasons why Americans would be allowed to go to Cuba. The fact is that there were 7 categories. Then those other 5 would make it a lot easier for Americans to find a reason to go to Cuba. Let's go directly into which are those 12 valid reasons for Americans to be able to travel legally to Cuba. Also, it's very important to make it very clear that Americans are not supposed to travel to Cuba on tourism. So tourism, going to the beach, is not a valid reason. Which are those 12 valid reasons? The first one is family visit. Obviously, you need to have a certain degree of family relationship with a Cuban national, okay? For example, this one reads, visiting a close family relative related by blood, marriage, adoption, no more than 3 generations away. So it means your 3rd cousin would still be a valid reason for you to visit Cuba. Then we go into the second point of that first category, which is if you are a Cuban national, obviously, a person who resides in Cuba, student or other persons located in Cuba for more than 60 days under the general license of official government business. So this is the first of those 12 reasons, or the first of all those 12 categories. Then number 2, official U.S. government business as well as a foreign government and intergovernmental organizations. It speaks by itself. It is if you're going to Cuba to work for your government or intergovernmental relationship with Cuba, you have a valid reason to be there, to visit. Journalist activities. There are many freelance journalists. You are allowed to go to Cuba as a freelance journalist as long as you can prove that you are someone who is regularly employed as a journalist, supporting broadcast or technical personnel, freelance journalists with record of previously working as such in other projects. This means that if you decide to be a freelance journalist today and you want to go to Cuba tomorrow, you probably won't qualify within these categories because you need to have a record of having done this freelance journalist activity before. We go into the fourth category, professional research and meetings. Research directly related to the traveler's professional background. That is, if you are a scientist on any branch of science, you are allowed to go to Cuba to do some of these researches. Professional meeting is not for the promotion of tourism and directly relates to the traveler's professional background. Okay, you can go to Cuba to meet professionally or to participate in events of this sort, as long as it is not an event or meeting aimed at promoting tourism. Remember, as I said at the beginning, tourism is not a valid reason to go to Cuba. You cannot go to the beach or just go to Cuba to go to the beach. You're not allowed. So far. Then we go into the fifth category, which is a long one. I'm just going to briefly pan through it. It's educational activities. Educational activities like persons, academic institutions, and their faculties, staff, and students who travel forth. You can go to participate in structured education programs that offer credits by graduate or undergraduate degrees. Obviously, there are several points here that kind of support this specific category. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can always go into the website for OFAC, which is the Office of Foreign Asset Control, which is the institution that regulates these categories and supervises the people that go to Cuba under one of these categories. So within these educational activities also fall the people-to-people travel. And this is one of the most used categories under which Americans travel nowadays. This is, as it says, the category in itself says, is people to people. The reason for this category to exist is only that the American travelers who want to go to Cuba to encounter, to meet people, the people of Cuba, participate in activities which are like day-to-day for the Cuban people, visit the basic facilities there, etc. And that's pretty much what the people-to-people is. These activities are to have an organized itinerary from day to night and are not supposed to have a lot of recreational time for the traveler. Then we go into the religious activities. Obviously, if you're a member or staff of religious organizations located in the United States. Obviously, these will require also probably a visa from the Cuban government, but this is one of the authorized categories. There are 12 categories, as I said before. Today we're going to start telling you about the first 6 categories under which a North American traveler can legally visit Cuba.